25 million to 50.
55 000, c'est sur le net.
This time in auction. Head-to-head in Paris, Modigliani's masterpiece sets a new record.
Even though she's sculpted in stone, you feel she has a real soul.
Everything must go. The Spencers clear out their aristocratic attic.
It is prudent to take the dinner services that are never going to be used because there are half a dozen alternatives and raise funds which could be used to manage the remaining parts of the collection.
A virtuoso's violin from the world's most famous string quartet.
It's in absolutely stupendously good condition, and needless to say, the sound is magnificent. There's going to be a massive punch-up for this.
510, and here, at £510,000.
And in London, art from the golden age of travel, when getting there was half the fun. Paris. At Christie's, they're mounting what they believe will be the sale of the year, with a record price estimated for a sculpture by the Italian artist Amedeo Modigliani. His head is conservatively priced at €6 million, but may fetch much more. It's the star lot in a sale of works dominated by French Impressionists, which come from the collection of Gaston Levy, the man who founded the giant French supermarket chain Monoprix.
Gaston Levy was a wealthy businessman who adored the arts and was a friend of Paul Signac. And Paul Signac found in Gaston Levy not only a friend and a patron, but a real financial support for what we call the Port de France, the ports of France, a series of over 100 watercolors that Signac executed over the course of a few years. He took off on the road in a Citroën with his chauffeur and depicted 2 watercolors of every port in France.
Gaston Levy's commission for Paul Signac is only part of the story. The sale also includes paintings by Eugène Boudin, his washerwomen by the Toc River, estimated at €120,000, and 2 small pictures of Trouville in Normandy, one of which perfectly illustrates the Impressionists' fascination with the seaside.
It's really a lovely little composition where you have, we can almost say, the entire history of Impressionism in this viewpoint. With the very high horizon line, you can absolutely see the influences to come of Manet, Degas, the beach scenes. You have the lovely detail of the child playing on the beach with a few brush strokes. Just the hint of a hat, which from a distance absolutely comes together, and you can see it coalesce into a hat. This is the dog, the overturned chair. Really a day at the beach. It's a cloudy day, but maybe 10 minutes ago it was a sunny moment. It's a lovely composition. When you do look at it and dissect the image, the figures are made of 3 or 4 brushstrokes and with so little. But from afar, which is one of the technical feats of Impressionism, is that these few brushstrokes from a distance do come together into an actual image, and you can really read the figures and read absolutely the imagery. When you think about other 19th century painters who were working at the time, they were painting very realistic scenes that absolutely mimicked reality. Whereas here, there's no mistake. We are not supposed to feel as if we're on the beach ourselves. We are absolutely meant to understand we are looking at a picture, a representation of a beach scene. And even the principle was revolutionary at the time.
Modigliani was a painter too, but only after bad health forced him to give up his first love, sculpture. Only 27 sculptures survive, 10 in private hands, including this limestone head from 1910, which has been in Gaston Levy's family for over 80 years.
Modigliani was really reacting against the industrial production of sculpture such as Rodin was producing at the time, and for him, really turning it back to classic sources like Michelangelo and sculpting directly into the stone was what he considered to be real sculpture. This head is sort of the summum of so many historical, classical, art historical references. You have the influence of oceanic art, the stillness and the quietness of her regard compared with the movement in her hair, which you can see on the side. It's really a contrast of forms, all the while remaining completely figurative. I think it has an amazing presence, and presence is something that's so difficult to define. Can you say that she has a charisma about her? There's something that she embodies. Even though she's sculpted in stone, you feel she has a real soul. It comes through, and that's one of its star quality. How else can you describe it? It's someone, the artist himself, who considered himself first and foremost a sculptor, and he couldn't even continue doing what he really loved because his health didn't permit it. It's a terribly tragic story, but with beautiful art that came from it.
It was a tragic story because Modigliani drank himself to an early death in 1920. 2 days later, his pregnant fiancée took her own life by jumping from the window of her father's house. As often happened, his work became more valuable after his death. Christie's are expecting a record audience for the auction itself. Of course, there's strong interest in the Impressionists, but the talk is all about the Modigliani. The catalogue estimate is 4 to 6 million euros. By the time the sale begins, in the experienced hands of Christie's president, François de Ric, the art world realizes that the estimate is likely to be exceeded. But by how much?
20,500,000 euros, 20 millions et demi, 21 millions avec Annika, 23 with Annika, 24 here in the room against all the phone, 25, 26 with Lionel against Annika, 28. 29 millions d'euros avec 30 millions d'euros, c'est avec Lionel Gosset au téléphone. 31 millions avec Annika, 34 millions, 34 millions, 36 millions, 36 million euros with Lionel, 36,500,000 against you. With Annika, 37 millions, 37 millions et demi avec Lionel, 37,500,000. Thomas? No? Annika? Do you want to bid, Annika? Could you say no or yes? Mais last chance. Non, c'est bien vu. J'adjuge à 38 millions et demi d'euros. C'est bien vu. Adjugé 38 millions au 939.
With the buyer's premium of 25%, that translates into 43 million euros, a record for Modigliani. The buyer, as always, that's a secret, and no one's sure if this head will ever be seen in public again. In London, the art of travel is going under the hammer. 60 years ago, the travel trade turned not to television to promote their holiday destinations, but to poster artists. Now, artwork that was slapped onto the notice boards of railway platforms and torn down at the end of each season fetches thousands of pounds. Posters by artists such as Abram Games and Terence Cuneo recall a time when travel was an adventure, when flying between England and Australia took only 10.5 days, and crossing the Atlantic was reserved for the rich and famous. It was a golden age, when no one seemed in a hurry and silver service came as standard. Poster artists captured the streamlining that was synonymous with travel in the 1930s, and the glamour that lasted until well into the 1960s. And they spoke of an age when the travel companies, particularly the shipping lines, wanted you to believe that getting there was half the fun.
Arrivals and departures invoke power and unfold splendor. The departure of the greatest liner is a story of a great queen and a retinue of self-important tugs that haul on cables, cross her bows at speed, and when she majestically turns, exert pressure against her side.
The heyday of poster design and production was really the 1920s and 30s. Although they were originally designed as pieces of advertisement, they were obviously pasted up on station platforms and billboards, and then when the next poster came out, it was pasted over. So really, it's quite incredible to think that some of them have survived in such good condition. They were sold at the time and collected by poster collectors at the time, which people don't often think about, but it was a collecting field even back in 1900, 1920, but obviously not quite at the level it is today.
It was the railways which really got the poster artists thinking. Apart from promoting the holiday resorts served by the 4 great train companies of Britain, how were they to portray the trains themselves, with romantic names like the Flying Scotsman and the Orient Express? When he immortalized the Nord Express, the French artist Adolphe Cassandre can hardly have dreamt that it would appear in this auction with an estimated sale price of £12,000.
He really is the best of the graphic artists of that time. He has an amazing use of perspective, of typography, and just the colours. He draws on cubism and surrealism, and I think really the result is stunning. The estimate on this one is 8,000 to 12,000, but it's definitely had a lot of interest, and I would hope that it would make a bit more than that today.
As indeed it does. Cassandre committed suicide in 1968. He left behind several new typefaces, the Yves Saint Laurent logo, and a legacy of poster art which is only now being recognized.
15,000 with you. 15,000 pounds, far back of the room. 15,000. No, 15,000, it is standing. 15,000 then, I'm out. 15,000, far back of the room, I shall sell that. 15,000 pounds. Thank you, 15,000 pounds, 702.
60 years on, the art of travel is alive and well. At Althorpe, Earl Spencer is having a clear-out. To keep his family's seat wind and watertight, Charles Spencer, Princess Diana's brother, is selling some of the family's silver, literally, along with the contents of Althorpe's attics. There are riding boots, fishing rods, footman's uniform, robes for attending a coronation, jelly molds, pots and pans, over 700 lots in all.
There are conservation issues associated with maintaining a huge historic house, and I think it is prudent to look into each area, take the dinner services that are never going to be used because there are half a dozen alternatives, and sell those, raise funds which can be used to manage the remaining parts of the collection. They were great collectors as a family. They loved things, always, for generations through the 18th and 19th century. Then, of course, they had Spencer House, so there's the contents of that. They had another house in Wimbledon as well. So, yes, the strength in depth in the Spencer collections is pretty unusual.
Among the Spencer lots are 13 from the stables, put away when the motor car came along, but never sold. They include the family omnibus.
This is effectively their private bus for taking family and staff back and forth to London, presumably just before the railways were invented, or then back and forth to the station. It looks like the carriage in every print of the Royal Mail Brighton run. Amazing number of seats on the roof. You've got 1, 2 at the front, including the driver, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 on the top, which would have been quite an experience for the people. I like the umbrella basket here, which has room for enough umbrellas for a few people, and then 4 in great deal of more comfort on the interior, which is, you'd think you'd feel pretty jealous. Historically, it's the most redolent one. Children go straight to this one on the view at the weekend. They're very pleased to see it.
And the state coach for formal occasions.
Early 19th century, used just by Lord and Lady Spencer themselves for state occasions, going to the state opening of Parliament. Nice thing about this is fantastic quality, silver mounts, everything. The coats of arms on the doors were updated for each use. So that is actually the 1911 coronation of King George V, which is rather nice. It's the then Lord Spencer and his wife's arms combined. But the detail, this is 1820s, made by Barker of Chandos Street, one of the great London carriage makers. The silver handles with a coat of arms on them, silver coronets on the roof, silver mounts all along the bottom of the roof, and then this startling interior made of red hammercloth. Hammercloth is a material that's been put through a heated roller to give this sort of corded effect, which is throughout, and then embroidery all over it. Absolutely remarkable work of art, really, I mean, in terms of the amount of craftsmanship and thought and design that's gone into these things.
The Spencers never threw anything away. They even kept spares.
If you're thinking of buying the state chariot, you could buy these, which are the surplus spare coronets off the roof. They're the same pattern as the ones on the roof, but with the addition of these rather charming cushions with their sort of thistle-like tassels on the base. They've been just put on modern bits of wood to turn them into rather elegant paperweights, but they're exactly the same as the ones on the roof of the chariot, and I think they make fantastic ornaments. A sale like this, which has got such wonderful provenance, wonderful objects, really hope it'll do extremely well.
Among the lots from Althorp's vast kitchens, celebrated cookery author Rose Prince has come to look at the jelly moulds.
It's it was very much a show-off table, very Victorian middle class. Mrs. Beaton's there on hand to show you how to instruct your cook and her team how to get all of this, get all of this done. You know, you were going to have the boss to dinner. You had to look good. They often would have made jellies in some of the sort of less ornate ones and then studded them with almonds and, I mean, basically gone completely over the top. I mean, I would loosely describe this as a bomb. The more traditional one here, it looks like a bomb. And that has a lid, and you would have put a kind of an apple ice into that, or a fruit ice of some sort, or a cream ice, and frozen it. You could kind of move it around before it was deep frozen as well, easily. This is precisely why there was, such a fashion for moulds. If this is what they thought was happening in the big house, this is what you did in your terraced home in Clapham.
The moulds sell for £14,000, 10 times more than expected. The pots and pans, what they called a batterie de cuisine, for £4,750, and the carriages fetch much more than expected. The omnibus goes for £91,000, 10,000 more than its upper estimate. The state coach has an estimate of 50 to 80,000.
Gentleman's bid at 45, 48,000, 50,000, 55,000, 60,000, 65,000, 70,000, 75,000, 80,000, 85,000, 90,000, 95,000 on the telephone at 95. Now you're all done. Telephone bid of £95,000. Last chance now, bids here on the telephone at £95,000, 100,000, 110. £110,000, still on the telephone, at £110,000. 110. At £110,000, last chance now, telephone bid of 110, I shall sell 110,000.
At the end of the first day, the Spencer family carriages are being shipped out to their new owners. But it takes 2 days in all to sell the contents of Althorp's attics. The sale total? Nearly £7 million, which will go towards securing the future of one of England's finest stately homes. It is one of the most prestigious addresses in London. On the top floor of the headquarters of the Royal Institution in Albemarle Street, Brompton auctioneers are holding a sale of musical instruments, and the market is buoyant.
The thing about instruments is that the old instruments are not being made anymore. Every year you have less and less instruments on the market because people are living longer, they're holding on to them for longer, they're keeping them off the market, and every year you have literally tens of thousands of new musicians coming in to the market from academies all around the world, all looking for a fine violin to launch their careers. So you've got long-term a fairly toxic equation because you've got less instruments, more musicians, but of course that means the price carries on rising.
A rising market in fine musical instruments explains why there's a top estimate of £80,000 for this cello made by Raphael and Antonio Galliano in Naples in 1848.
It's a very, very fine example of these makers' work, the two brothers. And they were part of a very famous dynasty of violin making, the Galliano family. This was sold in 1985 at Christie's, and it made a world record price for the maker then, which was around £17,000. And today we're asking £60,000 to £80,000, and I think I'm very confident that it'll fetch the top estimate.
But the star lot today is a violin made in Venice in 1723, still covered in its original varnish, once owned by Joseph Roizman, who fled the Russian Revolution and later became first violin in the Budapest String Quartet.
Originally this was bought in 1928 by Sada Shishari, who was an amateur violinist, and she bought it from Hills, I say in 1928, and she played it in New York. It was then sold to Joseph Roizman in 1942, who was the principal of the Budapest String Quartet, which was probably the greatest quartet in the 20th century. And he sold it then to the present owner, who's a very lovely doctor called Bertram Jacobs, who also lives in New York. And he could easily have been a professional musician, but chose to be a doctor. And he's loved it since 1962 when he bought it from Roizman. He was heartbroken to have to sell this, but he hasn't played it for over a year, and he realised that the time was right for somebody else to play it. It's in absolutely stupendously good condition, and needless to say, the sound is magnificent. There hasn't been a great violin like this for auction by Montagnana for about 20 years. There's going to be a massive punch-up for this, and we've got a lot of bidders on the telephone, and those are the ones that we know about.
Apart from the tender sound of this violin, its association with the 20th century's most famous string quartet justifies a top estimate of £400,000. At auction, the Galliano brothers' cello falls short of its top estimate, but still sells for £75,000. But all eyes are on the Roizman violin.
At 160, 170, 180, 190, 200. At £280,000, at £280,000.
And even mild-mannered musicians get excited when the price climbs away.
£280,000, 290 now.
A few minutes later, the violin reaches its top estimate. But the bidding goes on.
20 is the next bid. £400,000 I'm bid. 420,000. At 460,000, 480,000. Why not 500,000? It's a much neater number. 500,000 I'm bid. At 500,000, 520,000. On the telephone at £520,000. Anybody else in the room would like to come in? Do feel free. 510. All right, I'll take 510. He doesn't want to come in again at 520. 510 then, here at 510. Have you all done? Last chance, £510,000. Thank you very much. 922.
£510,000 for a small but perfectly formed piece of musical history. Next time, selling the family silver, Lord Raby's wine cistern leaves the country again.
It's been said that it's the best piece of English silver to come on the market in 50 years, but that's as far back as people can remember.
Buried treasure, the art locked in a bank vault for 40 years.
We knew that this painting was inside, so then we said, God, where is the Derain? And at the end, up with the, oh God.
Memories of Diana. That dress goes under the hammer.
You see how far she moved and how quickly she wore this dress to furore. Everyone went crazy because it was so low and so daring. Daring Di, they called her.
And tune in tomorrow. The Jazz Age radios from the US of A. Every one unique.